I am Jasmine, and this is the story of how I turned a bankrupt Chicago architecture firm into a $450 million empire, only to have it ripped away on my wedding day. My stepfather handed my legacy to my stepsister and told me I was worth $50. He didn't know I held the patents. This is how I fought back to build something even greater. Growing up in a drafty South Loop walk-up, I was the kid who'd rather study structural engineering than play outside. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The wind on the 42nd floor of a Chicago skyscraper isn't just cold. It's a physical weight. It cuts through wool and canvas, finds the gap between your collar and your skin, and settles there. For 10 years, that wind was my constant companion. While my stepsister Cassandra was in our climate-controlled office in the Loop, scrolling through color palettes for lobby curtains, I was 300 feet in the air, wearing a hard hat and steel-toed boots, arguing with structural engineers about load-bearing ratios. Sterling and Finch wasn't always a powerhouse. When I joined straight out of grad school, it was a relic. My stepfather, Richard, was still designing buildings like it was 1995, glass boxes that leaked heat and hemorrhaged money. The firm was technically bankrupt. They just hadn't admitted it yet. I didn't come on board to design pretty facades. I came to fix the engine. I spent 3 years coding a proprietary bioalgorithm that could analyze wind patterns, solar gain, and material stress in real time. It optimized building efficiency by 40%. That algorithm, which I named the Hive, saved the firm. It won us the contracts for the new waterfront district. It put Richard on the cover of architectural digests he hadn't been relevant enough to read in a decade. But Richard never saw the math. He only saw the margins. To him, I was useful. Essential even. But I wasn't the face. Cassandra was the face. She had the right look, the right laugh, the right ability to charm investors over cocktails while I was back at the office running simulations until 3 in the morning. People always ask why I stayed. Why I let them take the credit for a decade. It wasn't because I was weak. It wasn't because I didn't know my worth. It was because of a promise. My mother, Sarah, co-founded Sterling and Finch with Richard. She was the brilliant one, the visionary. When she died, Richard looked me in the eye at her funeral and said, "Jasmine, we have to keep her dream alive. If you leave, everything she built disappears." I stayed because I wasn't just an employee. I was a guard dog. I was protecting the ghost of my mother. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I made the firm successful enough, I could preserve her legacy. I didn't realize that loyalty built on trauma isn't loyalty at all. It's a chain. An invisible, heavy chain that keeps you tethered to a sinking ship, convinced that your weight is the only thing keeping it afloat. I thought I was honoring her memory. In reality, I was just providing free labor to the man who was erasing her. The signs were there, of course. They always are. But you ignore them because the alternative is admitting that the people who are supposed to love you are actually just consuming you. It started subtly about 6 weeks before my wedding. I was finalizing the blueprints for the Green City project, a $1.2 billion contract that would redefine sustainable urban living. It was my magnum opus, the culmination of everything I'd built. I went to check the project's social media feed to see if the press release had gone out. That's when I found it. A tagged photo on a private account. Cassandra's account. But not her personal one. This was a curated, professional page I'd never seen before. Cassandra Sterling Designs. I scrolled, and my stomach dropped. There were photos of my blueprints, my site visits, my sketches. All of them filtered, cropped, and captioned with phrases like, "late nights dreaming up the future," and "my vision coming to life." There was a photo of the Hive algorithm's interface, code I had written line by line with the caption, "So proud of the proprietary system I developed to save our city." I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone. I walked straight to Richard's office. He was drinking scotch, celebrating a pre-approval from the zoning board that I had secured. I showed him the phone. "She's taking credit for my work," I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. "This is fraud, Richard. If the board sees this..." He didn't even look up. He took another sip of scotch and waved a hand dismissively. "Jasmine, don't be dramatic. It's just Instagram. It's marketing. You know how this works. You're the hands, she's the face. That's the business. People buy the story, not the math. Let her have her fun. The curiosity gap opened right there. It wasn't just about credit anymore. It was about erasure. He wasn't just letting her pretend. He was endorsing it. He was telling me to my face that my genius was only valuable if it wore Cassandra's smile. I walked out of his office. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten to quit. I went back to my desk and I started digging. If they were willing to steal the credit, what else were they willing to steal? That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the code for the hive. I realized something terrifying. The reason Richard was so comfortable gaslighting me was because he thought he owned me. He thought the firm owned the code. He thought I was a fixture like the office furniture, necessary but property. He was wrong. The wedding gala was held on the rooftop of the dizzyingly high Marina Towers. The Chicago skyline glittered around us, a billion lights reflecting off the dark water of the lake. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ozone. It was supposed to be my night. Justin and I had kept the guest list small, but Richard had insisted on expanding it. For the business, he'd said. It's a networking opportunity. So instead of my friends, the room was filled with investors, city council members, and clients. Cassandra was holding court near the bar, wearing a dress that was technically silver but looked suspiciously white under the lights. She was laughing, touching the arms of the zoning commissioners I had spent months negotiating with. I tried to focus on Justin. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, his hand warm and steady in mine. He squeezed my fingers. Ignore them, he whispered. Just look at me. But then the music stopped. Richard tapped a spoon against a champagne flute. The sound was sharp, piercing. The room went quiet. He stood on the raised platform, beaming. He looked every inch the benevolent patriarch. Tonight, Richard boomed, his voice amplified by the microphone. We celebrate love, but we also celebrate the future. As many of you know, Sterling and Finch has entered a new era. And a new era requires new leadership. My breath hitched. Was he finally going to acknowledge me? Was he going to announce my partnership? I am thrilled to announce, Richard continued, gesturing grandly, that effective immediately, Cassandra Sterling will be stepping up as our new head of design and lead architect on the Green City project. Her vision has brought us here, and her leadership will take us forward. The applause was polite but confused. The people who actually worked with us knew the truth. They looked at me. I stood frozen. My smile felt like it was carved out of marble. Cassandra glided up to the stage, feigning surprise, beaming as she took the microphone. I didn't hear what she said. The blood was rushing in my ears so loud it drowned out the city. I turned and walked away. I needed air. I needed to get out before I shattered. I made it to the hallway near the elevators. I was pressing the call button over and over, my vision blurring. Jasmine. Richard's voice. I turned. He was walking toward me, not apologetic, but annoyed. Like I was a child throwing a tantrum at a grocery store. Where are you going? He hissed. People are watching. Get back out there and support your sister. My sister? I said, my voice barely a whisper. You just gave my career to a woman who thinks a load-bearing wall is a suggestion. She has the name, Richard snapped. She has the presence. You're good at the math, Jasmine, but you're not a leader. You never were. Your support staff. Excellent support staff, but support staff nonetheless. He reached into his pocket. Look, I knew you'd be emotional. You always are. Here. He pulled out a crisp $50 bill and shoved it into my hand. Take a cab home if you're going to be like this. Cool off. We'll talk Monday. This is your severance package from the fantasy that you run this place. This is what you're worth. I looked down at the bill, and then I saw it. In the corner, near the serial number, was a tiny red ink stain. A small, distinctive smudge. Time stopped. I knew that bill. I knew that stain. My mother kept an emergency jar in the kitchen cabinet. An old mason jar where she stashed cash for a rainy day. For when we need to run, she used to joke, though her eyes never smiled when she said it. That $50 bill had been in that jar the day she died. I had marked it myself with a red pen when I was 12, doodling while she cooked. Richard hadn't just insulted me. He had raided my dead mother's safety fund, the money she saved to escape him, to pay me off. The invisible chain didn't just break. It disintegrated. I looked up at him. I didn't cry. The tears evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "Thank you, Richard," I said. My voice was steady. "I'll take this." He blinked, surprised by my surrender. "Good. Now go home." I stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, cutting off his smug face, I didn't collapse. I checked my watch. It was 10:45. I had work to do. I walked into my apartment and kicked off my heels. I didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the city outside was enough. I went straight to my home office and woke up my custom server. Justin came in a few minutes later, worried, breathless. "Jasmine, are you okay? I saw you leave." I told them we had an emergency. "We don't have an emergency," I said, typing. "We have a solution." I pulled up the patent filings. I had registered the net zero bioalgorithm 3 years ago. But I hadn't registered it under Sterling and Finch. I had registered it under a shell company I created called Jasmine Incorporated. I had signed a licensing agreement with the firm, granting them usage rights, a revocable license. I opened the contract file. Clause 4A. Licensor reserves the right to terminate usage immediately upon breach of operational integrity or unauthorized transfer of intellectual property. Handing the project to an unqualified lead architect? Breach of integrity. Claiming ownership of the IP on social media? Unauthorized transfer. I drafted the email. It wasn't emotional. It was legal. It was a termination notice for the software license, effective immediately. I attached the patent numbers, the timestamps of Cassandra's Instagram posts as proof of breach, and the termination clause. I sent it to the firm's general counsel, the board of directors, and the city planning committee. Then came the kill switch. I opened the command terminal. I accessed the remote admin panel for the Hive, the system that controlled the climate, the security, and the structural monitoring for every building we managed. The system that held the blueprints for the Green City project. I typed in the command, lockdown_protocol_Vesman. The screen prompted me, "Are you sure? This will revoke all active keys." I looked at the $50 bills sitting on my desk. The red ink stains stared back at me. I hit enter. On the screen, a cascade of green text turned red. Access denied. Access denied. Access denied. Somewhere across the city, inside the servers of Sterling and Finch, the lights were going out. The blueprints were encrypting. The data was vanishing behind a firewall that only I had the key to. I sat back. I didn't feel sad. I felt efficient. "What did you do?" Justin asked, watching the screen. "I took my ball and I went home," I said. "They want to play architect? Let them draw by hand." 9 a.m. The sun was bright and unforgiving. I stood across the street from the Sterling and Finch building watching. I wasn't going inside. I didn't need to. I had a front row seat from the coffee shop window. My phone started ringing at 9:05. It was Richard. Then Cassandra. Then the CFO. I let it ring. Inside the office, I knew exactly what was happening. Richard and Cassandra would be strutting in, ready to start their reign. They would sit down at their desks. They would try to open the Green City files. And they would see a black screen with a single white padlock icon. At 9:30, I answered the phone. "Jasmine," Richard screamed. He sounded like he was hyperventilating. "What is this?" "The system is down. The city council is on the other line asking for the safety permits, and we can't open the files. Fix it. Now." "I can't fix it, Richard," I said, sipping my latte. "I don't work there anymore. You sabotaged us." "I didn't sabotage anything. I revoked a license. That software belongs to Jasmine Incorporated. You violated the terms of use when you publicly claimed ownership of the IP via your new head of design. You can't do this. We have a deadline at noon. We'll lose the contract." "You have a new head of design," I said, my voice calm. "Cassandra is the visionary, right? Let her have a vision. Let her draw the permits. She has the name. Surely she doesn't need my math. She can't draw a straight line and you know it." Richard yelled. The mask was off. The doting father act was gone. He was panicking. We need the algorithm. The entire structural integrity of the project is based on your calculations. Without the software, the buildings aren't compliant. That sounds like a leadership problem, I said. You bought a Ferrari, Richard, but you treated the mechanic like trash. And now the mechanic has the keys. You're just a man sitting in an expensive car that won't start. I hung up. I watched through the window. I saw Richard pacing in the lobby, screaming at his phone. I saw Cassandra crying, yelling at an IT guy who was shaking his head. I realized then that Richard had made the classic mistake of the empty suit. He thought that because he owned the building, he owned the intelligence inside it. He thought power was a title you could bestow. He didn't understand that competence is a currency you can't counterfeit. He had the keys to the office, but I had the keys to the empire. And I had just turned the lights off. He showed up at my apartment that evening. Of course he did. I opened the door. Richard looked like he had aged 10 years since the morning. His tie was loose, his hair messy. He smelled like scotch and desperation. Jasmine, he said, his voice cracking. Please. We can fix this. I'll give you a raise. I'll make you a partner. We can share the credit. Share? I asked. Yesterday I was support staff. Today you want to share. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. Look, your family. You can't let the firm fail. It's your mother's legacy. There it was. The final card. The one he always played. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. My mother's legacy isn't that glass box downtown, I said. Her legacy is me. Her legacy is the fact that she taught me to survive men like you. I handed him the envelope. He opened it. Inside was the $50 bill with the red ink stain. You stole this from her emergency jar, I said. You stole from a dead woman to insult her daughter. I'm not worth $50, Richard. But you? Without me, you're worth nothing. I stepped back and started to close the door. Jasmine, please. We'll lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. Then you better start saving, I said. I hear mason jars work well. I slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt. And for the first time in 10 years, the air in the room felt warm. The next day, Cassandra tried to spin it. She went on LinkedIn and wrote a long, tearful post about how I had sabotaged the family business out of jealousy. She claimed I had deleted files and stolen data. It was a good story, but I had a better one. And mine had receipts. I uploaded a folder to a public drive and shared the link. It contained the timestamped screenshots of her shadow Instagram, proving she had been claiming my work for months. It contained the patent registration documents showing I owned the software. And it contained the email thread where Richard admitted he knew she was unqualified but didn't care. The internet did the rest. Within hours, the architecture forums were ablaze. #Blueprint Betrayal started trending. Investors saw the proof. The city council saw the fraud. By the end of the week, the city had canceled the contract with Sterling and Finch. They cited gross mismanagement and fraudulent representation of capabilities. They opened a direct line of negotiation with Jasmine Incorporated. Sterling and Finch didn't just stumble. It imploded. Investors sued. The bank called in the loans. Richard filed for bankruptcy 3 weeks later. 6 months later, the wind off Lake Michigan was still cold, but I didn't feel it. I was standing on a new site, watching the foundation pour for the Southside Community Hub. It wasn't a skyscraper for billionaires. It was a mixed-use development with affordable housing, a vertical garden, and a community center. It was designed to be completely energy independent. Sterling and Finch was gone. Richard had sold the condo and moved to a rental in the suburbs. Cassandra was working as a receptionist at a high-end salon, telling anyone who would listen that she used to run a design empire. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped carrying them. And gravity did the rest. I wasn't interested in their ruin. I was interested in what I could build now that my hands were free. I used the profits from my new contracts to launch the Sarah Foundation, a grant program for female architects from underrepresented backgrounds. I realized that true revenge isn't burning the enemy's house down. It's building a better house that they can't enter. It's about creation, not destruction. I didn't just take back my power. I used it to light a fire that would keep others warm. I walked back to my office. My real office with my name on the door. On my desk, in a simple black frame, was that $50 bill. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was a trophy. A reminder of the moment I bought my own freedom. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, the city I was helping to reshape. I touched the glass of the frame. "You were wrong, Richard," I whispered. "I'm not the support staff. I'm the architect." If you've ever had to tear down a toxic foundation to build your own worth, hit that subscribe button. Welcome to the construction site of your new life.